born here in Everman, February the 13th, 1931. Two brothers, one sister.
Okay.
And an older brother, a younger brother, and a sister. Well, it depended on what phase of my childhood it was. I like to play all kind of games, softball, baseball, basketball. When I was in high school, I played, there was a men's league. I played in the men's league when I was in high school, softball team. And I played basketball in high school.
Okay.
That was basketball was the only sport we had in high school. The graduating class the year before I graduated, there were 6 people
Oh, wow.
that graduated.
Wow.
The next year when I graduated, there were 12 graduates. That was a large class.
Man, you doubled it up in 1 year. That's good. Okay, well, I have a pointed question. Steffi wanted me to ask you about a story when you were a kid about you skipping school and skinny dipping on your birthday. You remember that story?
Well, I've skipped school quite a few times and went skinny dipping.
You remember the one on your birthday?
Not really. I guess I'm sure I did it on my birthday, but
Yeah.
I don't remember any details about it.
I hadn't heard that one, but Steffi wanted me to ask you about that one specifically. I guess you had told her about that before. So you made this a ritual, huh? You just skipped school and skinny dipped, huh?
Yeah, well, we would have a recess in school, and when I walked out for recess, sometimes I just didn't quit walking. I just played hooky.
Did you have your favorite swimming hole that was out in the country that you could just go out there and do your thing, or what?
Yeah, the swimming hole was part of the Chambers farm down here between here and the crossroads.
Yeah.
Where the Chambers farm is, the creek runs through there, and that was, we had a swimming hole there that kids all went to, and so it was a short walk to get to the swimming hole.
And bathing suit be danged, huh? Didn't need it.
Yeah, skinny dipping.
Did you do that so your clothes wouldn't get wet, so when you got home your mom and dad didn't know?
Well, my mother could figure it out.
Yeah. What'd she think about that?
Well, I would be punished for it.
Well, obviously not too bad. You kept doing it.
Well, I was kind of hard-headed. I didn't learn from my mistakes very well. I would continue to do the same things.
How many times did you do that, and did she not tell your dad?
How many times I do?
How many times did you get caught doing something like that by your mom and she didn't tell your dad on you?
Well, so I don't know. I really. He punished me worse than she did.
For sure. For sure.
When he got involved in
yeah.
the thing.
I thought she might, knowing Nanny the way she was, I thought she might keep it between you and her sometimes, the punishment, so you wouldn't get that in trouble.
Yeah. I always liked to travel, to go places, and my Aunt Eva and Uncle George would take me places when they traveled. And I got a really big kick out of that when I was a kid.
Where'd they take you to? Do you remember any specific places that y'all went together?
Well, I remember we more than once went to Oklahoma with them.
That was a big trip back then.
They had, he had relatives in Oklahoma, and when they'd go to Oklahoma visit, his relatives, sometimes they'd take me with them. I was their favorite nephew.
Okay. Back then, it was okay to say you were their favorite, right?
Yeah. I went to college 1 year before I
Okay.
went in the Air Force.
Okay.
The Korean War started about the time that I graduated from high school.
Mm-hmm.
I went ahead and enrolled in Texas Wesleyan College and went 2 semesters. And I got my draft notice to go into the Army. And I was supposed to go in the Army the next year after the spring semester ended. I wrote a letter to the draft board and asked for a 30-day extension and permission to join my
Preferred branch.
preferred branch of service.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't use even 1 day of that 30-day extension. I went in the Air Force the day I was supposed to go in the Army.
Okay. Little strategic move there. If I gotta go, I'm going where I want to go.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So that was my next question: is why did you go? Well, obviously you got drafted. You decided to take the liberty that you did have in that and choose your own path in that. That's good. So how long was it? You went to boot camp, and did they kind of fast track you to get out there to Korea right off the bat, or did you hang back and do something else before you went?
Of course, I went through basic training at first, which was at Wichita Falls.
Okay.
And from there, I went to technical school in Denver, Colorado.
Oh, cool.
And following that, I was stationed in Ohio for just a few months. And from there, I went to Korea and served 1 year in Korea. And when I finished my tour of duty in Korea, I was stationed in Bangor, Maine. And I was there until I was discharged 2 years later. Except that was a strategic air command base. And in the strategic air command, you could count on going somewhere for a 90-day tour of duty every year. So 1 year I went back to Japan for 90 days, and another year I went to Florida for 90 days.
Oh, that's real rough.
And so I ended up doing a lot of traveling. I was trained to be a camera technician. But actually, I never did much repair work on cameras. While I was in Korea, really there were some men with the same skills that I had that did most of the repair work. And my job specifically was loading the magazines and pre-flattening the cameras before the planes took off to fly their missions. I was in a night photo outfit. We had B-26 bombers with the large aerial cameras mounted in them. And the plane would carry 8 100-pound flash bombs.
And what's that? Just so everybody knows.
The plane would fly over altitude of 7,000 feet. The bombs were set to go off at 4,000 feet. They would illuminate at that height, the camera would take a 1 square mile picture.
And simultaneously when the bomb went off so they could light at nighttime and see the picture?
Yeah,
All right.
the bomb going off triggered the camera,
Okay.
and they would always take 8 pictures. They would overlap. A picture would cover a 1 square mile area, but it was timed to where they would get the same thing twice. Half mile increments.
Okay.
It was timed for that.
Right. Okay.
And
Did you ever actually fly in the plane on these missions? Or
No.
Okay.
No, there were only 3 men. This is a B-26 bomber,
Mhm.
and there was only a pilot, a co-pilot, and a navigator. And the navigator was completely separated.
Mm.
The bomb bay was between the navigator and the pilot and co-pilot.
Mm.
And he was back there. The navigator was in a little cubby hole, no larger than this chair.
Sounds awesome.
And he sat there and all alone behind the bomb bay.
Mm.
And the camera was right in front of him, right, and between his knees practically was a big camera, and the bomb bay was between him and the pilot and co-pilot. I was never interested in photography until I went through texting.
And that sparked it,
and
being in the Air Force doing that?
Yeah.
Okay. So that when you were in the Air Force, this is leading up to a story I want you to tell. Did you purchase a camera over there?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I bought a really, well, I purchased a kind of a cheap 35 millimeter camera
Okay.
while I was in basic training in the Air Force.
In Korea? Or no, before you went?
Yeah.
I apologize.
And but later on, after when I did go to Japan, I bought a really good Japanese-made 35 millimeter camera, a really expensive camera, and
That's the one I want you to talk about. I
and
want you to tell us the story.
And I bought one.
Okay.
And I bought one really good camera besides that, a German-made camera,
Mm.
but I bought it from the PX in the Air Force.
Mm.
In Korea, I was stationed at Kimpo Air Base in Korea, and the front line was about 15 miles north of the air base that I was on, Kimpo. So I was, of course, the front line wasn't a static thing. It varied at times, but not very much during the time that I was there. It was usually around 15 miles to the front lines. And we weren't bothered very much by any bombings. We had numerous alerts when bombers would, radar would pick up bombers coming our direction, and they would sound the alert, and everybody would go get in their trench and put on their helmets and all of that good stuff. But only one time while I was there, in the year that I was there, was any bombs dropped on the base, and they were not near where I was. They were on the other side of the base, the few bombs that were dropped on our base. So I was never in any real danger there.
While you were in the military, Donna was born, and then either right after you got out or right around the time that you were about to get out, Rob was born, and then a few years later, Shara was born.
I don't remember exactly how long I'd been on the fire department before I went back to school, but it was pretty early in my career on the fire department that I went back to TWC
Texas West End.
part-time, just carrying a couple of classes.
Sure.
And then later on, I wanted to get my degree, and working the hours that I worked, there was a couple of classes I couldn't get at TWC because of my work schedule conflicting with the classes that are scheduled. So I transferred to TCU, and I could get the classes that I needed to get my degree. And so I did that and finished and got my degree at TCU.
So this would have been in the 60s that you did this? Or this was in the 1960s when you did this, or the early 70s?
It was in the 60s.
60s. Okay. And so you expressed a desire to finish that and get your major. What was your major?
Business administration.
And did you do that to try to do something with the fire department, or did you have different aspirations besides the fire department at that time in your life?
Well, I had already been on the fire department long enough that I didn't want to change careers.
Okay.
But I did get an automatic pay raise for having the degree. I was already a captain before I went into
The training.
teaching in the fire academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed being an instructor, but I didn't want to be there because I didn't like the hours. I was spoiled by having worked on the 24-hour, 48 off.
Yeah, for a few years. For years.
I had been working those hours, 24 hours on, 48 hours off, and I was spoiled to that.
Yeah, that Monday through Friday gig is not as enticing.
So I didn't really want to work 8-hour days, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
But I did for
Sure.
a period of time.
Yeah.
While I was an instructor.
And just to let you know on that, and a lot of people may or may not know this that are listening and watching this, I've bumped into quite a few people that are between your and my age and just got to talking with them and organically in conversation, them being a fireman and knowing you as a fire trainer has came up, and I think probably that those people that went to your class and hearing them talk enjoyed you being an instructor more than you may have enjoyed being an instructor in the hours yourself, because I've heard more than one person talk glowingly about you being the fire instructor, so that's a cool part of that.
I probably couldn't name all of them because I worked at some stations. Sometimes you just go there for a week or two or one day maybe, just to fill in, you know. When you're a rookie on the fire department, at first you're they call it a swing band. you're not assigned to any one station. You jump from station to station, work if a man's off sick or he's on vacation, you fill in his shoes at that station. And then you move on to another station and fill in for someone else. And depending on the turnover, and you may do that for a very short time, or you may do that for several years before you're assigned to a permanent station or semi-permanent station. Nothing is permanent. But I was very fortunate. I was number one on the list. So I was the first one out of a large class to get to go to a permanent station.
Did you get your choice of station, or was it just the?
No.
Okay.
No, you don't get your choice of stations. You go wherever you're needed.
Sure.
And sometimes you can put in for a transfer if there's a.
What was that first station that you got?
My first station was station number 7.
And where's that at?
It was on the corner of New York and Maddox,
Oh.
which is a few blocks south of Rosedale,
Right, east side Fort Worth.
a couple of blocks east of South Freeway. I told the guy that I would give him $1 if he would let me pull one hair out of his big toe. So he pulled off his shoe, and I got all this hair on his big toe, and I would pull on it just enough that tears would come to his eyes, but I never would pull it out.
Boy, that's that's a tough dollar to earn right there.
It's not. I never fought a major fire in a high rise. I don't recall any really major fire in a high rise.
Okay. But you did have
But
that
I did fight some fires.
in downtown, huh?
I was stationed downtown for a couple of years. Well, I was more than once. I was stationed down there. I went there as an engineer, driver, and drove a ladder truck at Station 2. That was my first tour of duty downtown.
Really?
Later on, after I became a lieutenant, I went back to the same station and was a lieutenant on the rescue squad. But then I was promoted to captain and never went back to the downtown stations. I worked at more than one station as a captain, and then worked as an instructor at the fire academy as a captain. I enjoyed being an instructor, but I didn't want to be an instructor because I didn't like the hours. I was spoiled by having 24 hours on, 48 hours off. And as an instructor, I was working 5 8-hour days every week.
You worked less hours but more days.
And
Yeah.
so I preferred the 24 on and 48 off. The reason we were called is because I was working on the rescue squad,
Uh-huh.
and we were the only people in town that had it was a steel mesh.
Like net?
like I'm trying to think of the word, to carry a injured person in. And the zoo, they had an orangutan that was fixing to give birth. And they wanted to move the orangutan from its cage to another building about a block away for that orangutan to give birth to the baby. And they didn't have any way of doing it by hand. So they called the fire department. And the rescue squad, they were the only one that had a Stokes basket to do that job with. We happened to be en route to a multiple alarm fire.
Oh, wow.
And the dispatcher called us to go to the zoo. And I said, we're en route to this multiple alarm fire. Go to the zoo. Okay. So we went to the zoo. They said, go to the zoo and go to the primate section of the zoo, and a man will meet you there and instruct you what he needs. And so we did that. We did a U-turn and went to the zoo instead of the multiple alarm fire. We got there and I met the man and said, okay, what do you need here? He said, well, this orangutan is fixing to give birth to a baby. And we don't have any way to carry her down to where we get to take care of her and let her deliver that baby. And so we got our Stokes basket, put her in there, carried her down a couple of blocks to where the veterinarian delivered the baby. I held her arms so they had given her a shot to kind of knock her out, but she started coming out from that and interfering with the veterinarian. So I held her arm and one of her arms so she couldn't interfere with him, and she was beginning to come out of that, and I was beginning to get worried because her arm was as hard as a brick. It's amazing how muscular an orangutan is.
Mm-hmm. But she never came to. Were you worried
never,
she was going to throw you across the room with one arm?
Oh yeah, she could have it. But she never came out of the that much. She was just beginning to come out of it, and I was glad that when the baby arrived and we could get her back in the cage. Some of the oddest things that I encountered was during my period of time working on the rescue squad, because we ran into all sorts of odd things. Something that the other fire companies wouldn't be involved in, they would call on us. Something, we did all of the diving jobs, body rescue, not rescues,
recoveries
and rescues. We were involved in that. We were more highly trained than the other firefighters. But a lot of that training was just learned by doing.
Improvisation experience.
Some of the some of the men were more highly trained than I was. They went through some specialized training before they got on the rescue squad. But the rescue squad had been in service for several years, and I was assigned there without any special training that the other men there had. But I just learned by doing it.
They trial by fired you.
I depended on, I was the lieutenant. I was a lieutenant in charge of, it's a 4-man crew, a lieutenant, an engineer, and two privates. And I was a lieutenant on there. And the other men that I worked with were all trained, and I learned from them, and learned by doing. And so we made out just fine.
So that rescue squad, I've never really asked you a whole lot about that, but that 4-man crew, is it kind of like SWAT, where that special unit is comprised of people from different stations and different departments in Fort Worth? You guys didn't all work at the same station together, did you?
Yeah, on the rescue squad we did.
Okay, so when you're on the rescue squad, you get assigned to that deal where you guys are all together.
There's one, at that time there was only one rescue squad in Fort Worth, and it was at Station 2 downtown.
Okay.
Had 3 shifts.
Okay.
So there were 12 men assigned just to the squad 2, 4 men to the shift.
Okay. So that's something I didn't know about him. And
And
that was
at that time there was only one rescue squad. We answered all of the fires in downtown Fort Worth. You know, District 2 was downtown Fort Worth, and a little ways out of the downtown. And we answered the entire city on any multiple alarm, whether it's second alarm, third alarm, whatever. If it's a multiple alarm fire, we answered the entire city.
wow.
And so we were the busiest.
Shifts went by fast. You had stuff to do.
We made more calls than anybody else in the entire city, because we answered the entire city.
Okay. So you said you learned on the job there. Is that where you learned to scuba dive?
Yes.
You learned from your guys how to scuba dive?
The other men that were on the rescue squad all had scuba diving training, but I was put in there to replace a man that had left there, and I had no scuba diving training. I just started doing it.
You had skinny dipping training. So you had that.
The guys I work with just, kind of got me started and filled me in. Here's the way we do this, here's the way we do that. And I was already a good swimmer, so no big deal. It was, and I was always used to wearing a mask anyway, fighting fires, so so a scuba diving mask is not that much difference, so yeah, no big deal to learn that.
That's neat. That's neat. Did you learn anything else, special skill wise, that you didn't anticipate going into that rescue squad? Was there any other training that those guys had went to special training for that you just picked up along the way outside of scuba diving?
They also had special first aid training, and had some training in some other specialized skills that other firemen didn't. But I just had to learn from the other man that was on there.
Right.
And learn by doing.
So were all firemen back then, were they not all paramedics like they are today?
Not all what?
Were they not all paramedics like all firemen are today?
No, they were not all paramedics.
So it was just,
All of them had some first aid training.
which could be very basic.
Yes, very basic training.
Okay.
And when I went on there, that's all I had was a very basic
Mm.
first aid training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Good. That's awesome.
But I did get some more advanced training while I was on there. I enjoyed my career as a firefighter. After I left the training division, I was a training officer. I enjoyed that, except I didn't like the hours. But it was, I got to know a lot of the men. I knew them, when I was teaching them in the fire academy, and then kept up with them after they graduated from the fire academy and were out in the district fighting fires. And I wanted to leave the fire academy. Not that I liked the job, but I didn't like the hours. So I wanted to go back to firefighting and have 24-hour shifts with 48 hours off.
Right.
So I went back to firefighting when I got the opportunity.
Right. And then ended up, working down the road from your house, in addition to the convenience of 24 on and 48 off,
Yeah.
you end up getting the gig down the road from the house, and bada boom, bada bang.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. So your
It
last
was-
few
it
years
was
in
an
the department.
ideal situation.
For sure, yeah. Did the kiddos or anybody that you knew come up there and bother you when you worked over there off Everman Parkway?
And that, oh no, that when I requested a transfer to get out to go back to firefighting, it so happened that the man at station right here, right in Everman nearly, he wanted a transfer. We just swapped places. He took my place as a fire instructor, and I took his place as captain of that station.
Wow. That's a
So
match
it was
made.
an ideal thing for both of us.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's really good. So when you were teaching people at that fire academy, did that kind of post-retirement, did that kind of lead you liking teaching people to go substitute teach in the Everman ISD? Or was it just something to do because you were used to doing things and still was active?
Oh, it was really
No correlation?
no correlation there. My teaching in the Everman School District was because Sylvia was tired of me sitting around the house.
Now that sounds about right.
She said,
So you go find something
"Why
to do,
don't
old
you
man.
find something to do
That's right.
instead of sitting around the house all the time?"
Uh-huh.
So
That was her
started-
job. Just
so I
for
started-
clarity.
Doing substitute teaching. I'm sure I couldn't name all of the states. I've been from Maine to California,
Wow.
and I've been from Mexico to Canada,
Wow.
but I missed some states in between all of that. I know I've been to, one of the last states I ever went to was Louisiana. I'd been to, I'm sure, over half of the states before I ever went to Louisiana.
You've been to Japan and Korea before you went to Louisiana.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah, I did. Of course, I've been to Japan. I served 2 tours in the Orient. I served a year in Korea, but I was back and forth between Japan and Korea several times. But then I went back later on when I was stationed in Maine. I was in the Strategic Air Command. and you go somewhere every year for 90 days. And I pulled a 90-day tour in Japan while I was stationed in Bangor, Maine.
Well, in the travels that you got to pick in civilian life, what was your favorite trip and why was that? Can you remember your absolute favorite trip that you took? Or maybe a couple.
It was probably the favorite trip. We went to California and several other western states. Sylvia and I visited Charlie and Ann in California, but we also went to Colorado on the same trip and several other states. We were going about 3 weeks and saw a lot.
Yeah. Is that the trip where we saw pictures of you guys driving through the redwoods, the redwood that actually goes
Yes.
over the street?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a cool one. That's good. So this can be, you can answer this two ways. You can tell me in your civilian travels, what was the most memorable thing that you saw or got to experience while traveling? And you can answer that same question of when you were in the military overseas. What was the coolest, most memorable singular event that happened or thing that you saw in your travels that really stands out to you?
Grand Canyon for one. It's awesome.
Yeah.
The Grand Canyon stands out more than anything else.
And what about overseas? Did you see anything equivalent to that over there? Maybe not equal, but
not to that. No, not equivalent to that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of sites that you remember. You know, like in Japan, some of those ornate temples and that sort of thing. They stand out.
Yeah. Okay.
There's so much to see there. Of course, I was there in wartime in Korea, and there was so much damage. At the time I was there, that area of Korea had been captured and recaptured and changed hands so many times, and there was so much damage done that a lot of the things that would have been nice to see were destroyed. She was the ideal mother, really.
Yeah.
And she loved all of her children. She had a good sense of humor.
Remember that.
She had a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
And she loved her family. She was a great cook. And my father was he complained a lot about, I'm sure he liked her cooking, but he would always find something to complain about. Nearly every meal. But her cooking was great.
Yeah, she was a great lady, and she was really funny too.
Yeah, she was.
She was funny.
She had a great sense of humor.
So, some of my memories about Nanny is that she loved playing games too. She loved games.
Yeah, she loved to play games.
She loved to laugh. She loved jokes. But I don't remember because I was so young when we lost her. I want to say it was in the mid to late 80s, 87, 88, somewhere in there. But I have a lot of personal memories that would only probably be special to me of her. But from your perspective, what was your favorite or most memorable story about her, or a collection of stories that you really cherish about her?
Well, I just remember that she was a great mother,
Mm-hmm.
and she loved all of her children
Mm-hmm.
and grandchildren
And
great
great-grandchildren.
grandchildren,
Yeah.
and spoiled most of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she did.
And I think all of us have great memories of her.
Mm.
Well, he was kind of strict.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he had his soft side too, but and he loved all of his children. But he could be very strict if he wanted you to do something, you better be doing it.
Or else.
But he loved all of us, and he was a hard-working man. He was a very smart man. He wasn't highly educated. I think he left school in the 7th grade to go to work. And but he didn't quit learning. He was very self-educated, and he was a very smart man. He was very good at mathematics. He could work math problems that I never could work. It was mathematics was easy for him.
Right.
He just had if he had had the opportunity, he could have been a professor. But he never got past the 7th grade.
Well, I guess whenever you pass your teachers in IQ, you just figure, what can they teach me anyway, huh? Well, but, to speak up to that point about him being cerebral and very smart and a hard worker, he was also very good with his hands.
Yes.
Like he was a welder, was he not?
Yeah, he was a welder.
And
He was a good carpenter.
right.
He could do most anything. He was he was raised in the country.
So, but, okay, he was a carpenter, he was a welder, but, I had a junior high project in the 90s and chose to do it it was a family genealogy project and chose to do a big portion of it on Pawpaw. And one of the things that, have the newspaper clipping and did some reporting on it, but he actually was part of a small group that helped build and weld the first fire truck in Everman. Is
Yes.
that correct? Tell me what you know about that.
They bought it was just a chassis, just
Mhm.
just a cab, really.
Mm-hmm.
And he and some other guys helping built the first fire truck in Everman.
Wow.
They bought all of the parts,
Mm-hmm.
bought the pump, installed it on the truck. He did all the welding and
Wow.
electrical stuff on putting that truck together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first fire truck in Everman.
That's wild that just a few guys kind of pulled their resources together and their talents and manufactured something from parts.
Yeah.
It's really neat. So, he was skilled like that, and I know you've told me before, he Did he play semi-pro baseball?
Yes, he did play semi-pro ball.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to some of the old timers here in Everland. They said that he should have been in the big leagues, but he did play semi-pro. There was a team, and they played their games over the old baseball diamond was north of the, where the bridge is over there on the 35, or right on the other side of 35, and north of that creek was where the baseball field was,
Okay.
where he played most of his games. And I've talked to some of the old timers that saw him play when he was a young man. And they said he really should have been in the big leagues.
Right. So he was a man of many talents, but he was also a guy that was pretty brave and eccentric at the same time. Like his whole thing with the bees, not only catching them fearlessly in his hand and letting you listen to the buzz in his hand, but also tracking them to their hive and extracting honey from that with no protection, really. Tell me what you know about that whole thing.
He could catch a honeybee in his hand and hold it up to your ear and say, listen to this.
Yeah.
He'd hold that up to your ear and you could hear that bee just a buzzing.
Yeah.
After a while he'd turn it loose and it'd fly away.
So that he could track a bee to a hive, right? As well, he could track a bee to a hive. And how did he extract the honey out without getting stung? Or did you ever witness that?
I don't know.
Wow.
But he did. He always kept honeybees. I would go with him. He would go down on the creek somewhere, and he would watch bees flying. And he'd see he'd follow those bees, see because you hear the old saying, a bee line.
That's where it
That
came
bee
from.
goes straight from where
Yeah.
he's getting that honey, straight to the nest.
Yeah. Straight line.
He'd follow those bees, he'd watch where the direction those bees are going till he'd find the nest. And if he wanted to get a new bunch of bees, he would go to that nest with his bare hands. He would take that honeycomb, honey, bees and all, and put it in a wash tub and bring it home and put them in he would build a beehive and bring those bees, honey and all, and put them in that beehive at home. Well, he was a hard-working man.
Yeah.
He worked hard all his life, raised on a farm, and he would always brag about how much cotton he could pick.
Yeah.
He could pick twice as much cotton as most people, and so he would he had paid by the pound, so he would always outpick everybody that was in the field.
Is that what he left school in junior high, 7th grade, to go do, is pick cotton?
Yeah,
Really? And he did that where? Where was that at?
he picked cotton as when he was just a kid, and continued on it after he was even in his married life. Some he still picked cotton.
But where at? Where did he do that at? In Everman or?
In the Everman area.
Okay. He was born was
Around
he born and raised here as well?
Everman and Crowley and
Sure.
this area. He was a very interesting person.
Mm-hmm.
He had been a model in his younger days. He was such a handsome man. He would model clothes for department stores. And he was in the catalogs, some modeling clothes. He was raised in Oklahoma. He, a good part of his life, he was a pretty heavy drinker. He was an alcoholic. But he, in his later years, he quit drinking completely. And he helped other people quit. And he would get on to him and really try to forcibly make him quit drinking this practically. When he quit, he was through with it.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very interesting man. Loved to hunt and fish,
And race, unofficially.
and he loved to take me with him when he went hunting and fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Not the other boys, it was me. I was his favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did a lot of hunting and fishing together.
Well, Rob had told me a story. Wasn't it George that installed that light switch for grandmother's stove?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember
that
that
was
story?
a funny one.
Okay, tell me about that one.
You know, all the light switches used to, you turn a switch on and off, it'd be a loud click, turn it off and on.
Be a thud. You used to have them in this house.
So, light switch in the house, my Uncle George and Aunt Eva was living in the house with my grandmother after my grandfather had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
The light switch went out. He put in a new one, and this new one didn't click.
Mm-hmm. It was silent.
It was silent. She says, "Well, how will I know when it's on?"
Mind you, she wasn't blind.
No.
Right.
Uncle George cussed a lot.
Yeah.
He said, "Blankety blank." You can tell it's off or on by looking, not by listening.
Well, I should train your brain to listen first. We'll look later.
Yeah. He was funny.
Well, I mean, so many of the stories that I've heard from other people about George has been about how incredibly fast he drove.
He what?
How fast he drove.
Yeah, at one time he was a fast driver.
Yeah. Were you ever in the car with him on some?
Yeah.
Every time?
No.
Pretty much every time you were in the car with him, he was driving?
Well, not in his later years.
Oh, okay.
Not in his later years.
Yeah.
In his earlier years, he was a fast driver.
Was that at the same time where it coincided with him drinking a lot?
Well,
That's not a good combo.
he drove fast whether he was drinking or not. And he drank whether he was driving or not.
Yeah, it didn't matter. He was same guy no matter what,
Yeah.
huh? Wow. Okay, well, I don't know if you have any more stories about George for us, but if you do, let's hear it.
Well, he loved hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
And he would take me with him. I thought she was the prettiest girl that I had ever seen.
Yeah.
And she was dating a guy, and I was dating another girl. They were brothers and sisters. I was dating this girl, and she was dating
The brother.
that girl's brother.
Wow.
And they were from West Texas. They were living here with an older sister and her husband.
Mm.
But once we went to West Texas to see their families. And Sylvia and I drove together. I drove her to West Texas and back. And really, that's when I fell in love with her.
So you were already plotting on
And,
trying to make that happen.
And we were both already dating this, and I really was planning on marrying this girl. But after I went in the Air Force, I got the Dear John letter from her. And while I was still in basic training. So anyway, later on, when I got a leave, I dated Sylvia. And so that's where we made our connection. She had broke up with this boy, and I broke up with his sister.
Mm-hmm.
So we got together. Oh, wasn't all that much longer. Of course, I went in the Air Force, and we were dating long distance.
Sure. Hard to do.
And but anyway, then I asked her to marry me, and we didn't date that long until we were married. She had so many great qualities. First of all, she was beautiful. She was her character. She was just a good person and a good Christian, and a good wife and a good mother and a great grandmother. She
I can
loved
attest.
her grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just an all around very nice person, and very beautiful.
Yeah. Inside and out, for that matter.
I remember I was in Korea when Donna was born.
Mm-hmm.
She was 4 months old before I ever saw her.
Wow.
And of course, I was happy to get back and be able to see that baby girl. And I remember that we had decided upon a name before she was born. We decided that her name was going to be Deborah. So when Donna was born, they wanted to get me the news. I was in Korea. They wanted to get me the news as fast as they could. So they sent a telegram. It took me 7 days to get the telegram. If they had written me a letter, I would have got it in 3 days. So that was one of the funny
They sent
things.
a dove with a note on it? What was that all about?
It really actually, it took me 7 days to get the telegram, but I always got mail in 3 days.
So how did she get from Deborah to Donna?
Well,
What happened with that?
they changed their mind. We'd already decided on the name,
Who's they?
but I don't remember. I think it was
Granny switched her mind?
Granny or maybe her sister.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, they changed their mind. I wrote a letter, and when I learned that she had been born, I wrote a letter to Deborah.
Because that's what you thought the name was.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but they had named her Donna.
Okay.
I don't remember whether that was Sadie's idea or my mother's idea, who, came up with making the change on the name,
Well,
but they did.
so when you got back, you guys had Rob after you had got discharged from the Air Force, or right around the time that you got discharged?
After.
After, yeah. And you guys lived over there in Poly in Fort
Poly.
Worth, and then you guys moved to Everman before you had my mom, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
Or afterwards. I think afterwards. I think she might have lived over there. as
I
well.
think she was born in, when we lived in Poly too.
Okay. Well, so then you got back from out of the Air Force, started your career in the fire department, was going to school.
Well, first I went to work at General Motors.
Oh, that's
No, I first went to work at a boat company that was over here on the highway.
I did not know that.
It's not there anymore. But there was a boat company there, and I worked there for several months, and then I went and took a test to get on the fire department, and I passed the test, the written test. There were 200 people that took that test, and I was number one.
Nice.
I was already proud of that.
Yeah, you should have been.
And anyway, I got hired to go work on the fire department. Had all of 2 weeks training before I went to the station.
Goodness gracious.
And then I could have been promoted earlier, but I didn't feel like I ought to. I waited till I had 7 years on the job, and then took promotional test, and got number one on that test.
Very good.
I was number one on the entrance exam, number one on the driver's test. Later on, after a couple of years as a driver engineer, I took a lieutenant's test. I messed up and I was number 9 on the list.
Oh man. I didn't study for that one, huh?
And I got promoted.
That's good.
And then I was a lieutenant for 2 years and took a captain's test. I was number 2 on that list.
Obviously really busy at that time, going to school, working, trying to be a dad.
Yeah.
So
if I didn't have a part-time job, I was taking several hours at college.
right. And you were still trying to raise a family as well.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Which was, I'm sure it was pretty tough to do all that,
oh yeah.
even with the time off from the fire.
I didn't have time off.
Well, I mean, on your 48 hours off, you
Yeah.
filled it with other things. So,
At first, it was 24 hours on
right.
and 24 off.
Oh, yeah. So you were working a lot more at that time.
And I was getting some college hours then.
Mm-hmm.
But then went to 3 shifts. I was working 24 and 48 off.
Okay.
But I managed to get my degree doing that. Get a good education.
Mm-hmm. It's worked well.
Study hard. Do your homework. Learn all you can. Get the highest education that you can do, because it'll help you your entire life. I think everyone should find their place in life. Choose a life that you would like to live, a job that you would like to work at. Choose a person to marry that has the same likes and dislikes, personality that would fit yours, and having a happy marriage. People cannot always see eye to eye or get along together. But you can make it work. If you love one another, you can make it work. And Sylvia and I, we seldom quarreled or never had any major clashes. We didn't always agree, but we always kissed and made up. And we certainly loved one another. And never had any major problems. Never any separations or bitter quarrels. We had a happy marriage. I have enjoyed a long life. I'm past 90 years old now. You know, the old saying, life is 70. Well, I'm well past that. I'm in my 90s now. And hope to get a little bit older. You know, people set goals in their lives, have accomplishments that they would like to make. I haven't achieved all of the accomplishments that I had made, but I've achieved some of them. I got a higher education than I ever thought I would. Took me about 30 years to graduate from college, but I finally made it. I had a good job. I was fortunate enough to be able to take tests and do well on them. I was number one on the entrance examination when I went on the fire department. 200 men took the test, I was number one. I worked as a private for 7 years. I could have been promoted earlier had I wanted to. I wanted to get the experience of fighting fires. After 7 years, I took the driver's examination, driver engineer. I made number one on that test. So I was promoted to driver engineer. So I become a driver on ladder 2 downtown Fort Worth. After 2 years of being an engineer, I took the examination for lieutenant. I came in number 9 on that list. I didn't study at all for the test, but they promoted more than 9 people, so I got a promotion to lieutenant. After 2 years of serving as a lieutenant, I took a test for captain, and I was number 2 on that list, and got promoted to captain. And that was my goal on the fire department, was to be a captain. I have no doubt that I could have become a district chief if I'd wanted to, but I'd always wanted to be a captain. When I got that promotion, that's where I stayed. I never took another test. I know that I could have been promoted, but I wanted to be a captain, and that's what I stayed. Had a good long career, enjoyed all of it, had some good friends, had some good experiences, got some good memories. And I've had a good retirement. After I retired, I sat around the house here, didn't much. I'd do a little work around the house, but got all the things done that needed to be done. Then I was just sitting around the house. And Sylvia didn't like that. She said, "You need to get a job." So I started teaching school as a substitute teacher. That got me out of the house, and of course she didn't have to look at me every day. So I did substitute teaching for a few years, and then I drifted away from that to staying at home again. And she didn't talk me into taking another job. Had a good retirement, lived a good life. We got to travel, we got to go places that if we wanted to go somewhere for a week or a weekend, sometimes just on the spur of the moment. I remember once I was still working then. I came home from the fire hall one morning, and we had breakfast and sitting and talking. I said, "I'd kind of like to take a little trip. Why don't we go down the hill country?" She said, "Okay, let's go." Within 30 minutes, we was in the car and gone. We took off and went to the hill country. Stayed 2 days, and I came back and went to the fire hall. So and then after I retired, we did things like that fairly often. On the spur of the moment, if we wanted to go to Arkansas or Oklahoma, we'd jump in the car and go. And we enjoyed that, having that freedom to do that. We did. Now, a trip to California, we did a little planning on that one.
It's 3 weeks. What about your Waco trips on the Sundays where the Cowboys game were blacked out? Was that were those planned trips too, to get out of church real fast and haul down to Waco to get a hotel room to watch the Cowboys?
Oh, well, we didn't even call. We'd just go down there and find one.
Oh, you just rolled?
I'd get off work, come home. We just hook them to Waco. We'd go down there and get us a motel room.
Just watch the Cowboys.
Watch the Cowboys game. We'd go to a restaurant, eat lunch, and go to the motel room, flip on that TV and watch the Cowboy game.
Couldn't watch it at home, huh?
They were blacked out in
If they didn't sell it at home. Yeah. Yeah.
But if you could go to Waco, you can pick it up there.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, we did that several times.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd even go as far as Austin to do it.
Wow. That was a far trip back then.
But that was kind of a good getaway for us to go there and see the Cowboy game. We loved traveling together. We made several trips to Arkansas and Oklahoma, California, and we especially enjoyed the trips to Colorado and California. We went to California, and of course we got to ride the trolley,
San Francisco.
San Francisco, and all of that stuff. And got to go ride the boat to the island.
Alcatraz.
Enjoyed that. We enjoyed traveling. We enjoyed our stay in Maine. We made a lot of friends there. Some of the friends we made friends with over the years. Some of the couples that were in the Air Force that we were close to, we remained friends with them and was able to visit with them when the two couples lived in Oklahoma, and we got to see them several times after we all got out of service. The men were pilots. Bob and Evelyn Harris were our closest friends. He was a pilot. When Bob and I had to go 90 days temporary duty to Japan, Sylvia and the other girl, they lived together while we were in Japan. And then a year later, we had to go to Florida for 3 months. And Sylvia came home here and stayed here for 3 months while I was in Florida. Sylvia and Donna were here with the families for 3 months, and I was in Florida. And then we went back to Maine. So we did a lot of traveling. When I got out of the Air Force, I needed a job, of course, so I went to work for General Motors. That General Motors plant in Arlington was fairly new, and I went to work there. Fortunate enough to get a job at General Motors. Well, first of all, I got a job at a boat company, a boat company over here on the highway, and I worked there for several months, And I heard that they were giving a test to, for the Fort Worth Fire Department. And I took the test, and I got number one on the list. So I was hired by the fire department, and went through training, and I only, they had what we call swing men, rookie firemen that just go from station to station and fill in for people that are on sick or on vacation. But I was number one on the list, so I got to fill the first vacancy when somebody retired or quit. So I wasn't a swingman very long, just for a couple of months. And then I was assigned to a station.
Right.
And you had to have 2 years on the job before you can take a test for a promotion. So after I got my 2 years in, I took the next engineer's test, and I made number one on that list. I was the first one to be promoted from that large group to be a driver engineer. So I filled that job for 2 years. Most of that time I was driving ladder 2 downtown, aerial ladder truck. Part of the time I was driving pump 4, a pump truck out in the Polytechnic area.
Mm-hmm.
Then I took an examination for lieutenant, and I made number 9 on that list. And I was promoted to lieutenant, and served 2 years as lieutenant. I was eligible to take the captain's test, and I took the test for captain, and I was number 9 on that list. So I got promoted to captain, and I could have taken another test and got promoted to district chief, but my goal in life was to be a captain on the fire department. So I remained the captain and was happy in that position, and retired as a captain at Station 28.